You, Cherie. That was an absolutely amazing talk. And we were just talking backstage before that, and just so much information to absorb in. I think she's absolutely phenomenal. Now, it is time, almost time, for our final part of the day, something that I'm sure a lot of you have been looking forward to. We are going to be closing off the future of Monzo with, as the screen says, a Q&A with our CEO, Tom Blomfield, and Eileen Burbidge, who was our original investor from Passion Capital, who put up the money for this company to even exist in the first place. But I'm just going to take a couple of minutes before I introduce Tom and Eileen. And what I wanted to do is actually tell a little story that I have that involves Eileen that I've been waiting a long time to tell. And I think you'll enjoy it. So, as I told you in my intro earlier, I've just celebrated my 3 years at Monzo, and we were a tiny company when I started. And because we were so tiny, and I was one of the first people working remotely and working evening hours when I started, I used to do 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. shifts. That's what I used to do. And I was often the only person, or maybe one of 2 or 3 people, who would be dealing with customer support inquiries for our small amount of customers that we had back then outside of UK daytime hours. And so sometimes you'd log on and you'd look at the queue and you'd just be waiting for something to come in. You'd relax and have a cup of tea, and then something would pop in and you'd deal with it. And then one day I'm working and I hear a little ping and I see a support ticket flash up, and the name says Eileen Burbidge. And being somebody that's a bit nosy and likes to do his due diligence, I knew who Eileen was. I hadn't met her, but I knew who she was. So I sat up in my chair and fingers flying across the keyboards, clicking on it and trying to find out what's going on. And it turns out that Eileen had lost her Monzo card on Hampstead Heath, and some enterprising individual had found it and treated himself and his friends to a few rounds of drinks at the local pub. As well, I hope if any of you found a debit card, you wouldn't go and use it, but people do that kind of thing. And so Eileen had written in to tell us this, and I very promptly, in probably a couple of minutes, got her card frozen, blocked, replaced, all the money refunded, and that was that, and it was all sorted. What I didn't know was that Eileen would then immediately tweet about it with a screenshot of her Monzo app showing the spent money and the card block and replacement and then the replaced money, with the tweet saying something like, "To the expletives who found my lost debit card, F you, Monzo's got my back, hashtag Team Monzo." And which was pretty cool. Then what I didn't expect even further was that the next day, Forbes would write an article about it. Headline, "Tech superstar shuts down card thief, Eileen Burbidge shuts down card thief with Monzo." Big Forbes article. And I'm just thinking, what on earth is going on? Like, I haven't been at this company that long, and this is crazy. Anyway, I don't know what the next board meeting was like when Eileen came in to see Tom the next time, but I'm hoping it was one where she was suitably impressed with the people we'd hired, aka me, doing customer support. Maybe I saved the company that day, or she was very happy with her investment. I don't know. That's the way I think about it. But like I said, been waiting a long time to share that story, and I'm pretty sure Eileen said at some point she'd buy me a beer, so maybe I'll take her up on that. With that said, it's my absolute honor to introduce for the final part of the day, the future of Monzo Q&A session with our CEO, Tom Blomfield, and our original investor, Eileen Burbidge. Give it up.
I do still owe Simon a beer.
Hello. Almost there. Last session, I promise, and we're the only thing that stands between you and your evening. So I hope you've enjoyed the day. We've got some amazing questions, and I'm really happy to be joined on stage by Eileen. So to kick it off, a question for me, apparently. With huge tech giants like Uber looking to break into the banking industry, how does Monzo prepare for competition, not just from legacy banks, but also these tech giants? I get asked this a lot, especially by new investors who are sort of asking what the moat is. And the honest answer is I'm not very concerned about the really big tech giants, partly because they've already had a go, mostly. So Google has Google Wallet, Amazon has Amazon Payments, Facebook Credits, Apple Pay. And I don't think any of them, first of all, I think they're all nibbling around the edges, basically. They're all looking to make payments easier, more accessible, often to drive more business their own services. And I think what we're trying to do is start from the very center. So not nibble around the edges, sort of discretionary payments, but be the center of your financial life. And we're trying to build out from that, from the current account, to become the kind of storefront to your money. And so I don't worry about tech companies or tech giants doing that. What I do worry about sometimes is that there is a leaner model out there that lets you be that hub, that control center, without having a banking license, without having 1,400 people, someone that can actually build a sort of aggregating hub perhaps on open banking. And I think perhaps fast forward 10 years, that may be possible. But today, I don't think with the current state of APIs as they are, that is possible. So in a nutshell, I don't worry about it that much. Next question. Why don't we go for one to Eileen, and I'll step back. Eileen, what motivates you?
Generally, or like today? I'll talk about
both.
Generally, I didn't see this question earlier. Okay, I'm quite old, so I'll try not to make this very long. But what motivates me is actually feeling good about what I spend my time doing. Is a very general, non-specific answer, but hopefully applies to today, but also specifically. And I think it's because I have children at home. I've had the chance to work with great people, good teams, and so at the end of the day, I want to reflect and be able to feel good about what I spent my time doing.
And has that been true throughout your career? Or has that changed? Have different things motivated you?
Oh, I think it's changed because I think, listening to Cherie talk, I think it's really interesting. I'm clearly now in a very, very privileged position where I work for myself and I have a partnership, and so I can have a little bit more autonomy over what I spend my time doing. Certainly earlier in my career, don't think I really had that choice. So even if I didn't necessarily feel that good about what I was going to spend my time doing that day, I did it anyway. So I think what motivated me maybe earlier was trying to demonstrate my value or contributions in order to get to a position where I might get a little bit more autonomy or a little bit more decision making, and therefore a little bit more flexibility and privilege to choose what I spend my time doing.
Cool. Someone has asked, much of what challenger banks tend to focus on is gauging the attention or engaging the attention of young people with metal cards and exclusive perks. But as their needs mature, how does Monzo plan on demonstrating that it has adult features that will ensure we feel safe, trusting our salaries can be deposited? So I don't know. I somewhat disagree with the premise of the question. I think young people or older people all want to feel trust, right? And so I think trust is a really interesting word, where I think by and large, we have got users' trust that we will do the right thing. Like if there's a sort of hard choice, Monzo will make the choice that is fair in the interests of customers. I think there's a different kind of trust, which is like, are you going to be around in 2 or 3 years? Sort of the longevity. Like, I don't necessarily trust NatWest to do the right thing, but I do trust they're going to be around in 5 years because if they screw up, the government's going to bail them out. And so it's that kind of sort of length of existence almost. And the TV campaign was so successful this year because for a certain group of the population, simply seeing a brand on TV is an amplification of that trust. So I think one thing is trust. The second, I think, is broadening out into a different set of services. So for example, I talked earlier in the day about spotting when you might need to refinance your mortgage, coming up to the end of a fixed term deal and you're about to go into a revolving interest rate or a variable interest rate. That's a really a choice that that more affluent people make when, most of us, when we're younger, don't have that worry because we don't have mortgages. But I think as we broaden out the set of products we cover, like insurance, mortgage, wealth management, I think it will become economically irrational not to use Monzo. And that is a bold statement. But I think if we do our job properly, we should be able to automate so much of your financial life that we actually are saving you thousands of pounds a year, and it should be economically irrational for you to want to do that yourself. So I think that is, those are the two ways I'd answer that. One is sort of trust and being around. Second is broadening out that product set and being so good at it that basically every person would be better off trusting Monzo with their money than not. And metal cards as well. Everyone loves metal cards. Eileen, good investments are as much about investing in great people as great ideas. What did you see in Monzo's leadership team? Gosh.
There's always exceptions to the rule, right? Just teasing. I think some people might know, but maybe not everyone knows. So I'll just say, I mean, I had the benefit of knowing Tom before we made that first Monzo investment in 2015, because we also invested in his previous company before that, which is called Go Cardless, also a London-based fintech company. So we had invested in that business and shared an office with that company originally in 2011. So I'd had 4 years of working experience with Tom, and there was this sense of trust he was just talking about, but also confidence that his abilities, obviously combined with his two other co-founders from Go Cardless, were a fantastic combination. And so to answer this question about the Monzo team, what we really thought was brilliant was, the first deputy CEO, Paul, the first CFO, Gary Dolman, the experience of people who also complemented, Tom and then Jonas as a CTO with banking experience, frankly. Our belief was that this was absolutely hugely compelling and something we wanted to back, and we thought that Tom was, some of that we had firsthand experience to validate that. But we did also think the combination of their experiences coming from tech, combined with those from people with traditional banking, was going to be unstoppable.
Thank you. I really should have read these questions before they came up on the screen. But, Eileen, what is the hardest question you've asked me and the other founders, and how did we respond?
So this is an interesting question. I did see this one in advance, and I overanalyzed everything, sorry. But I did wonder, do they mean hardest question for me to have asked the Monzo founder, or hardest question I thought I was putting to the Monzo founder?
Most awkward or most challenging?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so if that's the case, I don't actually think there's been anything terribly awkward or challenging. Because I think, again, maybe because of the working relationship, but also we had, I think, established trust even with the co-founders I hadn't worked with before, because they trusted Tom to say, oh, I've worked with Eileen or Passion Capital, so we know them. So that when we did put questions to them, I think it was always taken and perceived as a, let's talk this through. Obviously, there's never any right or wrong answer. Do you want to go to the US? Yes. Like it's just a, what's the strategy for international? What's the strategy for maybe business banking? Are we being inclusive enough to customers? Are we being accessible enough? How's our customer support? All the questions we might ask weren't necessarily very difficult or meant to be provoking. It was, how do you think about this? How can we support you in doing this? And we would have disagreed. There are things where I would have said, I'm not sure that I would do it that way, but obviously the whole point of being an investor is we can't be control freaks. We kind of trust, the founders and the teams to make basically about 1,000 micro decisions a day, and so there's no point in even commenting on larger decisions. So I don't think there was anything terribly, terribly difficult. There might have been questions about where we see, the next set of growth coming from. How are we going to break from early adopter millennials or something like this? But I don't think there was anything that we ever thought would be a gotcha, or that we were necessarily disappointed that the team would answer in a bad way. Maybe it was, why don't you stay in our office longer instead of moving out?
Next question. Which company do you wish you could have got behind and supported? Or what's your anti-portfolio? Who do you miss out on?
Anti-portfolio, yeah. There's a lot. Too many to answer this Q&A session. But maybe one, and actually it's very nice of the person to add in and supported. So I'd like to think that we've supported a lot of businesses, even those that we didn't invest in directly, but maybe the one that comes up a lot, and we actually still get credit for it because we've supported it so much, is TransferWise. Another London-based fintech, actually started in our offices, just like Monzo did, and actually Go Cardless when they came back to the UK. So most people would think, okay, reasonably, hopefully not stupid people, they were in your office, you would have invested. So we do get that credit, but we ended up passing on that investment the first time it was proposed to us, and then missed it by the time we realized, oh shit, that was obviously a very bad idea. So that would be my...
Oops. Oh, you made it up with Monzo, I hope. But what were the 2 or 3 biggest operational challenges Monzo faced when it started sort of scaling from a small successful idea into a larger successful business, and how did you address them? Oh my God, I think you could write a book about this. I mean, people have written many books about this, and perhaps one day when all of this craziness is over, I might write a book about it. No, seriously, why do people laugh about that? That's very insulting. I mean, it's a cliche, because I think it's true, that basically everything breaks every time you double. And so we started out as a team of 13 or 14, and within the first year we doubled to about 26, and then 60, and then it really, really exploded. I think we were like 180, and then 400, and then 1,400. So doubling almost every 6 months. And so particularly communication, I'd say. When you are all sitting in a small office around a set of desks, you achieve very quickly a sort of mind meld, and you know what everyone else is thinking and doing because you are so close to them like physically, right? It's so easy to lean over and see what someone's doing and talk and discuss ideas, and you're working so hard, but you achieve this kind of mind meld, which is amazing in the early stage, and you can get a lot done like that. And so if I was starting an early stage company, I'd stay as small as long as possible, because that is an incredibly productive state. But at some point, you do need to scale up. You need to add specialist skills. And then you need to be really, really conscious about communication. Because when you're 50 people, you don't achieve that mind meld. And people don't have the benefit of having that shared culture and background. And so you need to be really explicit about onboarding and teaching people what your ways of working are and your values. And then the way you communicate priorities, especially as a CEO founder, I found myself repeating myself 10 or 15 times. But for the person receiving that information, it was perhaps the first time they'd heard it. Maybe they'd heard it 2 or 3 times, they just weren't listening. But being really, really deliberate about communication and figuring out ways that scale. And so sending out whole company emails that you'd spend 2 or 3 hours actually writing a really good email because it might be read by 1,000 people. And that's going to help them decide how to act over the next 2 or 3 months. Or we do all hands, a bit like this, honestly. Every Wednesday, we gather 1,400 people around the world in a live stream in all hands, very much like this. And Eileen did a Q&A about 6 weeks ago. And so figuring out those scalable mechanisms for communication is the one biggest thing I'd point to. I could go on and on and on, but we're limited time. And so look out for the book.
You'll have to buy the book. Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah,
buy the book. Some companies, sort of a culture of blameless postmortem. We have a very, very similar thing, honestly. And we've had too many outages in the past. We've been pretty open about them. And we do a very, very similar thing where we'll hold 4, 5, 6 days later when everything's calmed down and we've hopefully fixed it all, we'll have a postmortem. People will contribute a set of facts, and then we'll try and figure out what we could have done differently to prevent it next time. We'll typically actually publish that post-mortem. So you may have seen the faster payments outage a few months ago. We published actually what went wrong, or we had another incident when we're scaling up a Cassandra database, and we misconfigured it very slightly, and that caused a period of outage. We actually published a really, really detailed technical post-mortem and announced what we're going to do differently in future. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important because it's the only way you learn and grow, really. Yeah. Eileen, what can investors like Passion Capital be doing proactively to encourage and support founders from socially disadvantaged groups and minorities?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think the short answer is that there's not enough. So I think all investors, but including Passion and myself, we should be doing more. And hopefully the fact that some of us will take time to try and get out of our sort of tech little bubble and go to events or invite people into our office space for open office hours or speak on what might look like broader media. A lot of people will ask why I might do things on BBC or something like that. But just to make sure that we are getting outside of the tech bubble is hopefully one way we do that. And then just trying to then sort of help illuminate more role models, and the fact that we are investing in all sorts of different types of people and founders from all sorts of different pathways is, I think, the best that we can do, but hopefully everyone's going to start doing that a lot more and more and more.
Cool. Uh-oh. RCI input, that looks bad. Tom for Eileen. I did ask this question. Sorry, my screen has got, it's live again. Your day job at Passion involves meeting a lot of early stage companies. And so my question is about trends, basically. Digital banking seems to be a trend. Do you see other things emerging now?
Yeah, I think we see lots of trends, and I don't know if they're sustainable or very good trends, but we certainly see a lot. So for instance, scooters, ride sharing, bikes, bike sharing, that was a big wave. Food delivery was a huge wave. Taxi hailing apps were a big wave. It's amazing because within a month, you'll see, or we would have received 4 or 5 different business plans trying to do exactly the same thing. Right now, there's a big trend in direct-to-consumer, for example, for hair sort of, what am I trying to say? When your hair loss medication over, getting it by post for men. Erectile dysfunction pills for men. All over the place. We're getting lots of pitches like this. And so there are lots of different trends. I would think maybe more specifically to this audience in fintech, I think the next wave following sort of digital banking and a lot of the early fintech companies we were seeing, like payments, remittance businesses, and a lot of things that were directly for consumer problems or reducing friction for consumers, Now we're seeing a lot of fintech proposals that are what we would call B2B or enterprise fintech. So where entrepreneurs are trying to solve problems that they would then sell to other financial services institutions and not directly to consumers. And I think actually that's going to be a massive, massive, massive value sort of sector.
Final question, which I didn't write down. If you were going to start a company tomorrow, what do you think that would be?
I hate that question because it's terrible. I think this is the reason, you know, was it teachers don't do and they teach? Is that what it is? People who can't do teach? That's unfair to teachers, obviously. But I am definitely somebody who really enjoys investing and thinks it's such a privileged position because it allows me to live vicariously through fantastic founders. I have wanted to be a founder, so I'm a wannabe, but I have never come up with an idea that I thought was good enough. As you can tell, I overanalyze everything. I have said before that, and Tom knows this, in the last 10 years since I've been on the investing side, there's only been one time where I've thought, oh, this might be interesting to actually join this company, but I won't say who that is.
Okay, well, I look to screen. So someone's scribbling all over that.
Because it's my question for you up here. And I put 2 questions in one. I kind of took a little bit of liberty.
Okay, what is this? I genuinely haven't read these.
I only came up with this like 2 hours ago.
Okay. Monzo's now nearly 5 years old. What was the single biggest hurdle you overcame? And when you look ahead to the next 5 years,
Good question, right? Oh, that's good. Thanks.
Honestly, getting a banking license is the single biggest, most painful and most challenging thing I think that we overcame, honestly. People from the US, some investors from the US now say, oh, it's really easy to get a banking license in Europe. And it's like, no. It used to be impossible, and now it's excruciatingly difficult. And so, relatively speaking, it is easier. It was not easy. So getting the banking license, and that was really down to the kind of 15 or 16 early people around me who did tons of that work. I mean, it took 2 years and 4 months to get a banking license. So I think we were the fastest ever at the time. So that was brutal. And looking ahead to the next 5 years, the biggest challenge for me, and one of the biggest things I'm working on, is figuring out how to be a really good manager. I think to hire and promote and grow and nurture the senior team around me so that they themselves are kind of inspirational, energizing leaders. I think I've been lucky, I guess, that I find it relatively easy to stand up on stage and talk to a bunch of people and say we're going there, and for some crazy reason, people believe that that is the right way to go, in fact, and will follow. And that's been very powerful, but at some point, I think that becomes a problem because I become a bottleneck. And I actually don't think that is good. I think there's this kind of this cult of putting founders on a pedestal, and it goes wrong. You sort of Travis at Uber and Adam Newman at WeWork, and I mean, hopefully Tom at Monzo is not the third in that list, right? Like,
I should have asked him this before we invested.
And so, trying to develop people around me and really give them the stage, I think is really, really important for the next 5 years. I'm not going to be around forever. I mean, I hope to be here for the next 10 or 15 years. But I think if a company relies on one person too much, it can be very, very dangerous. And so that, for me, that's the biggest thing. I think that may be it. So thank you all for giving up your Saturdays. Hopefully it's been interesting. Really, really great to see so many familiar faces and new faces. I really, really hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you again for coming. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That is it for the day. Let's get one more big round of applause for Tom and Eileen, please. Feel free to please grab drinks on your way out. There will be lots of staff members hanging around. Actually, before you all disappear from the room, I just want to say one thing. From the looks of this event, you would probably think that we have a massive events team. We actually don't. I want to give a massive shout out to our community manager, Naji, who put in a huge amount of work to put this together. So massive, massive shout out for Naji. Really, really amazing. And thank you all for coming. It's been amazing. Thank you.